Welcome to Heart Failure Unfiltered. My name is Nick Hartshorne-Evans and I'm the founder and CEO of the Pumping Marvellous Foundation, the UK's heart failure charity. Today, in this new 3-part series from the Pumping Marvellous Foundation, we're opening up the real conversations about cardiac devices, not just what they are, but what they mean for your life. This podcast is episode 2 of 3 of a mini-series talking about cardiac devices and their role in the management of heart failure. Episode 2, this one, is about life after the implant, because living with heart failure for the rest of your life is important. A heart failure diagnosis doesn't mean life stops. With the right treatment, knowledge and support, many people continue to live meaningful and fulfilling lives. The Pumping Marvellous Foundation helps people learn how to live well with heart failure through practical advice, resources and community support. If you're navigating life with heart failure, we're here for you. Search Pumping Marvellous Foundation today. When I was diagnosed with heart failure, what I needed most was clear information and reassurance. That's why we created the Pumping Marvellous Foundation. Every day, we help people understand their condition and feel less alone. Just £5 can help us reach the next patient who needs that support. £5 might not change your day, but it could change someone else's. Visit pumpingmarvellous.org and help support patients today. All right, so this is a patient conversation. So let's introduce ourselves. We're at Liverpool Podcast today, and just going opposite me is...
I'm Gavin Redhead. I'm a patient educator with Pumping Marvellous, but I also lived with devices, and particularly an ICD for 15 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Fozia.
Hi, Fozia Ahmed, heart failure and device cardiologist up in Manchester.
Sorry, do you want me to call you Dr. Ahmed?
No, I'm from Fozia. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And next to me?
Hi, I'm Corinne Hudson. I've had a device for 4 years and I am patient educator with Pumping Marvellous and deputy chair trustee with Pumping Marvellous.
Right, here's the first question to you then, Corinne.
Go on then.
So this episode's about life after the implant. I was going to say transplant then. Life after the implant. So let's go back to the moment you left hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And what did that first day or night feel like to you?
Very different. Very different.
By the way, we're talking about one of these, aren't we?
Yeah.
Sort of type things that I've got a clutch of them in my hand, but these are the cardiac devices that we're talking about. Okay.
So mine was placed under my muscle rather than just under my skin. So it was quite painful, but it was manageable pain. It wasn't so painful that I couldn't sleep. I still managed to sleep, but I slept fairly upright and on pillows, sort of like propped up.
But this is the first night.
This is literally the first night. But then, the days that followed after that, it became easier and easier. And I, yes, you're restricted with my arm for a while. But it's, you find ways of working. I've broken an arm before, so it felt almost like breaking an arm from my point of view, because it was the sort of restrictions and the sort of pain level, if you like. So yeah, but it felt reassuring.
Did anything surprise you in the first couple of weeks of having it? Did you have an assumption what could be, and then what actually, so from assumption pre to having it post?
I think what surprised me about me was that I was very nervous. I was nervous around people. I was nervous because people couldn't see it, obviously. And people, when you meet people, people's first thing to do is to give you a hug, and you don't want to be hugged. I don't want people near me, because of them sort of like nudging it or touching it or whatever. I didn't want to be around people in crowds, and I you obviously can't drive either, so you feel a little bit like your world shrinks. Because the alternative then is to use public transport. Well, I didn't want to go in public transport because I didn't want to be grabbing for a pole if I was getting off a bus or, whatever, because of the, limited movement. So my world did shrink a little bit, but you build back. It became aware to me that that's what was happening, and I was doing less. And I thought, right, I need to do something about this. So I'm only talking about the first couple of weeks. I was like, right, I need to make sure that I still go out.
As time goes by.
Absolutely, yeah. I do all sorts of stuff now.
What do you call yours now?
My I can do.
I can do.
No, I can do.
I can do.
I can do. Yeah. Because it was a way of me looking at what I could do, not what it was or my heart failure was restricting, it was a way of sort of me saying to myself, look, I can still do this. I can still walk. I can still, I can find new things to do as well. So it was about that.
Gav, can you relate to that?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the physical side of it, there are restrictions for the first couple of weeks about not raising your arm too high, not lifting heavy weights, doing anything physical. And I think the other thing for me was the mental side of it. How would I set this off? So if I had to run for something or did something or pick something up, it was heavy, what would it take to set it off? And I think that sits in the back of your mind. I don't want to trigger this thing because I know this thing is going to give me a shock and I'm not sure what that's going to be like. So there's almost a fear factor. But it did create some physical restrictions in terms of what I could do, because at that stage I was a volunteer youth worker. I was a kayak coach. And so that virtually ended that. I couldn't do teaching people how to kayak. So I used to do things, and be able to pop up from being underwater, etc., and doing things like high brace. All that had gone, so I wasn't able to do any more kayaking or even canoeing, because that requires a lot of the things on. If you were bracing on that side, there would be too much pressure on this device.
So initially, obviously, it is an alien device in you that lives with you and is with you for the rest of your life at the 24/7. But when does your life, Gav, start feeling? It never feels normal, but there's always a element.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's sitting there, it's physically there, and in the first few weeks, there's a lot of swelling. There was lots of bruising initially, and you've got this lump on your chest, like Corinne's saying, I learned to hug on one side. So I don't know if you did this, but if most people approach you to hug with two arms, you put one arm up, it indicates to them which arm I want you to hug me with. So that means that you can create that distance between you. But the thing about the device is, you know why it's there. It's there for a specific reason. And one of the ways that I combated the fear of doing it was I went to a cardiac rehab program where I went to the gym and they trained me, and I learned with somebody who was trained to deliver specific training for cardiac patients, what limits I had in terms of what weightlifting and being able to use it. And that way I knew I had the confidence that I wouldn't trigger it to set it set off.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go on, Corinne.
So I was going to say, it's a bit like, for those of you who've got children, a bit like when you have a toddler and you're suddenly very aware of all the plug sockets in the room and of all the dangers. You sort of feel acutely aware of all the things that you might feel different because of it. And then after a while, you kind of, with a second child, the plug sockets are just plug sockets. It's fine. Yeah. And it just becomes normal.
So here's a question for you, because this is always comes up on the community. It has for years. How much anxiety is there around a device, an ICD or an ICD element, so CRT-D or an ICD, around the activation of an ICD? I mean, you can understand why there's anxiety. Gav, from your point?
I mean, Fozia implanted one of my devices, and I remember that conversation. It's about, well, don't worry. By the time it comes to it actually activated, you probably won't be aware of it. You might have passed out, or you might think. But then you're thinking, well, actually, if I've passed out and I'm driving, because there are driving restrictions that come along with a...
Yeah, can you just talk to us a little bit?
I can tell you a little bit in terms of my experience. Mine was put in as almost like a preventative thing. So it was just in case, because I would start to have dangerous arrhythmias. So because of that, I was only restricted for, I think it was about 4 weeks, there was a driving restriction. But if it's put in because you're having continuous arrhythmias, I think there's a 6 months.
That's right, yeah. So 1 month for preventative devices, and then 6 months if you've either come into hospital and had a dangerous heart rhythm issue and then need a defibrillator.
So in the UK, I just want to be really clear with this, in the UK, it always goes to the DVLA.
Yeah.
Yes.
Without question.
And then they send a form to your implanting cardiologist, who will then fill it in after a period of time has elapsed, and you document that the follow-up and monitoring of this device is regular, that there have not been any distracting arrhythmias.
That's always a big question. That's always a big question about driving. Certainly when you've got people who have driven HGVs and buses, and there's life considerations.
Yeah, things change when you have a Group 2 license. and your heart muscle function is significantly reduced. But for a common garden variety, regular car license, Group 1 license, they would be the restrictions. 1 month for a preventative device and 6 months for what we call a secondary prevention device for the first ever implant.
So I just want to hone in on what you were saying before, Corinne, about, I suppose, the initial anxiety of this and maybe what people thought, or what I mean, you mentioned about hugging and, friends and family. And when did it start feeling normal for you? Because I think Gav's given us a sort of an indicator, but when you've got that anxiety, when did it start?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking through, because you sort of have a bit of a timeline in your head. So mine was fitted in the March, and I think about by the summer, I was feeling completely confident with it by then, and I would. But again, I pushed it in as much that I went down on a train journey down to London by myself and crossed over London, then got another train further south, and I did it because I knew that it was an issue. And therefore, I wanted to make it so it wasn't an issue and prove to myself that it was still possible, and I can still do things. And I almost had a mental tick list of things I wanted to do to sort of and then hold those in my sort of armour, if you like, of right, I can still do these things. But it does. It definitely gets easier. And that goes with the sort of the pain and the movement as well. It's sort of you're able to forget about it more when it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt as much.
To be honest with you, with everybody on here, in the group, and we have thousands. We've seen tens of thousands of patients through that group. And when somebody's had a device, there's always the apprehension and then the post is this is as the picture comes on in Facebook, either gets rid of it because they think it's something gruesome, or it managed to stay there. Yeah. But after that, I never see anybody ever have an issue. In fact, they are fully embracing the value of what it is that's happened, and whether that's improved, in many times improved symptoms, but also with the ICDs and the CRT-Ds with the defibrillators in them, it's I mean, we should have said how, what do you call your device? Yeah. Because everybody starts getting personal with it. It gets emotional. Yeah. And that means it's working.
Why do I feel exhausted even when I haven't done much?
Fatigue is one of the most common symptoms of heart failure. Your heart has to work harder to supply your body with oxygen and energy. Treatment, pacing your activities, and listening to your body can help.
I've really enjoyed listening to you both talking about your devices, but what I've realised just hearing it is that there's two sides to every story, isn't there?
Right.
There's almost the patient side, and where you're thinking about living with a device and what are the implications of that. But for me as a clinician on the opposite side of the table, my story is actually with the patient in front of me. How do I reduce their risk of having a heart rhythm problem that could cause a problem? And that's why we think about devices. So it's really interesting to hear those viewpoints stretched.
So here's one for you, and this does crop up a lot. I see patients struggling with what they can and what they can't do with a device. So we covered driving. Okay, so with DVLA. Yeah. Go to the DVLA. Don't necessarily take but go to DVLA and find out, and you'll get instruction from your healthcare professional. Can I exercise? That's a question. And another one is, can I travel? That's another question. So do you think patients get appropriate guidance on exercise and travel? Or is there still confusion? Because I would say there's still confusion. Now, whether people are in the right setting to listen and we're communicating to them in a way that they understand or they want to listen is another thing. But do you think we try hard enough, or do you think we go, as your suitcase, away you go? What do you think, Gav?
I think you get the standard, almost like 3 or 4 page booklet. Here's your device. This is what it is. Whether it comes from the device manufacturer, whether it comes from the clinic, it's been watered down. And we know there's Pumping Marvellous got some excellent materials around devices and use and living with devices. But with many other things, there are support groups, talking groups where like you could have this kind of conversation in a room with maybe a dozen people and say, I've lived with this device for umpteen years, and I can tell you that you can do exercise, you can travel. I mean, I went to New York, and if you've been to New York, you know that the airport style security is at every major building, no matter where you go.
You were the most scanned person in New York.
I was one of the most, I would say I was the most frisked person in America that week that we went for, because every place, we went to 2 or 3 significant buildings or places, and everyone has got that kind of thing. Now, at some of the major airports now, they have got device-friendly scanners, and you can use them. But if not, you're almost given like a passport, aren't you, for the actual device itself that explains what it is, what it's about, whether that's on your phone or whether that's in like a credit card size. Or I used to have like an A4 fold-up booklet that was made smaller, and you can show that to people and to explain what that you're able to pass through security. So for me, there's no issue with exercising. Certainly take it easy in the first 6 months. Do something like I did. Go somewhere friendly where they can guide you about how much exercise you should be doing. But I alongside Fozia and Nick, I walked a marathon while I still had my device in, and I was suffering from heart failure. So it was physically capable of doing it.
Andy was faster than me.
Yeah, you were behind Fozia.
Thanks for that.
Oh, dear. So, let's go to Fozia, because we've talked about a lot about the patient. We're going to ask one big question right at the end, okay? And it's a difficult one. Where as a system do we need to get more people support? Where's the issues? So this is about living with it, isn't it?
Yeah, do you know what? I'm listening to you, it's got so many cogs turning in my head, but I think what we focus on as medical professionals is how to optimize the device and make sure there are no complications. But
It's
again,
about numbers.
It's about reducing the risk of the lead displacing. It's about making sure that the wound remains intact, telling people about monitoring the site, making sure that there's no significant redness. If there's signs of infection, come straight back. What we overlook or perhaps don't focus on enough are the how to live well with a device, how to resume normal, how you get back to living your life as normal afterwards. And I think you're right. I think we talk about the essentials, so the driving restrictions, informing the DVLA. We don't talk about, you would hope people get referred to cardiac rehab, but how to go about improving your exercise regime, getting back to the gym, going on holiday, travel insurance.
So let's say somebody has cardiac rehab, let's say when they are optimized and, there's no stability, is there, but are relatively stable, and then they get off of cardiac rehab.
Yeah.
Because, but then, when they decompensate a little bit and you start thinking, oh, that person may need a device. Did they get the opportunity to go back to cardiac rehab, or is that a bit of a challenge?
Seldom is that the case. So I've often found patients in clinic and thought, actually, this patient hasn't gone back to the gym since they've had their device. Let's get them through cardiac rehab because they're concerned and, their family is apprehensive about them going back to the gym. They physically have been told that they need to
but that's
have
a super centre. Like you, the believer, drive that. I'm talking UK wide.
Yes, but my point is, even at where we are, patients with cardiac devices have reduced access to cardiac rehab compared to someone who's had a heart attack and going for cardiac rehab. So there are inequalities in access to cardiac rehab based on ejection fraction, based on where you live, and based on whether or not you've got a device or don't have a device. Not every cardiac rehab. So it's
a cardiac rehab enabler. It's an exercise improvement. It gives.
Yeah, I think, Pumping Marvellous have worked a lot in this space about doing virtual rehab and online rehab. So I think that will increasingly bridge the gap and ensure that more people have access to doing cardiac rehab in that way.
So here's the big question for everybody. And it's a tough one because I just hope we don't get lambasted for it, because it's a very emotional one. We talk about kicking the chest with a horse or something. Yeah, you know what I'm going to talk about. But what does it feel like if the ICD goes off? Now, I don't know whether we've got, but what do people tell us from the community?
I mean, I had the advanced therapy bit where it overpaced, and I felt like I was jogging on the thing, and but I didn't really notice it that much. It was only the clinic that told me that's what had happened. I'd only realised when they told me at this time on this date, what were you doing? Because they know exactly. It's just the remote monitoring. But people that have said within the community where it's gone off, it is almost like being kicked by a horse. But again, quite a few, and it aligns with what you were saying, most of them were either asleep or didn't know and just got woke up and thought, did something happen or did something not happen? They weren't always aware that it had happened. I think when they've had, what do they call it? When they've had multiple...
Yeah, storm.
A storm.
Yeah.
So when they've had a storm, I think that's a different league.
Yeah, that's where you've had lots and lots of therapies delivered because your heart keeps going into the keeps going into the abnormal rhythm. But yeah, you're quite right. There's a range of experiences. For the most part, the design is to give designed to watch and see if the abnormal heart rhythm breaks of its own accord. If that doesn't occur, then it'll deliver what they call pain-free therapies, anti-tachycardia pacing. 8 short bursts of a
tachycardia is fast heartbeat. Yeah.
So 8 beats delivered in quick succession that are designed to break the abnormal circuit. That can be done over on several occasions, and only if that is unsuccessful and the person remains in an abnormal heart rhythm will a shock be delivered by the device. But we get varying experiences. Some patients are aware they've had a shock. Other people, you phone them up the next day and they're like, well, I've not felt anything. I was asleep. Or
I've got a really good question for podcast 3.
Okay, sorry.
I'll
save it.
No, you don't want it is because I've just thought of it now. I think it's a really good question. What do you haven't had a...
I haven't had a shock,
right,
no.
What do you see from people in the community?
Yeah, there is obviously a worry there, and people do want to know, and the people who have shared their experience, I would, say that it's quite varied. But from my perspective, it's pain is difficult when you don't know what it is. If pain is purposeful and you know what it is, I think you can deal with it, even if it's horrendous pain. If you know it's actually for your good, or that it's going to, should be short-lived, and obviously it makes you live, then I think it's interesting. It's not something that scares me. I feel like if I did get a shock, I'd be relieved. Even if it was ridiculously painful, because I wouldn't be here otherwise. So
the thread is off this podcast is you can live with it. If you have an intervention like a shock, it's there for a reason, which is a bit of an onboard paramedic thing. You can call it what you like.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really important discussion that we're having, because I think people can easily get offered and easily have a device put in, but actually what does the rest of their life look like with what I would say is an assist to better living?
Yeah, consider the alternative.
Right.
If you didn't have the device and it happened.
Right. That's a lot better than what I was bumbling on about. So thank you very much for attending this, and I think we'll see you in podcast 3 actually.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.